The summer after I graduated high school, a couple of my closest friends and I wanted to do something different before heading off to college. Most people I knew were planning beach trips, camping, or just hanging out, but I had something else in mind. I'd always been fascinated with ghosts and haunted places, even though I'd never really had an experience I couldn't explain away. So I suggested we take a road trip through Texas and stay at a few supposedly haunted spots. Our first stop was this old bed and breakfast I'd read about in a book called Haunted Texas. It was in a small historic town, tucked into a quiet neighborhood where all the houses looked like they'd been standing for over 100 years. When we pulled up, the B&B looked like something straight out of a horror movie. Tall windows, lace curtains, a wide wooden porch that creaked when you stepped on it. In the daylight, though, it came across as charming rather than creepy. Inside, the owners were friendly. The rooms were old-fashioned but comfortable, and nothing about it seemed threatening. Honestly, if you didn't know it was supposed to be haunted, you'd probably just think it was another quaint, historic bed and breakfast. That night, after dinner in town, we came back pretty late. The whole house was quiet, most of the other guests already asleep. My friends and I decided to head downstairs to the common room, where they had a fireplace and old couches, and we pulled out our brand new digital cameras. We wanted to see if we could catch something paranormal in a photo, maybe an orb or shadow. At first, it was just fun. We were laughing, whispering ghost stories, daring each other to go stand in the darker corners of the room. But that changed the second we heard the doorknob. It was loud, clear, and unmistakable. The old wooden door that led into the common room had this big brass knob, and we all turned our heads at the same moment when we heard it twist. At first, I thought it was just another guest coming in late, but the knob didn't just jiggle once. It turned slowly, back and forth, like someone was deliberately trying to open it. All of us froze, staring at the door. Nobody said a word. We just sat there, waiting for it to open, waiting to see someone step inside. But the door never opened. We could hear the knob creak in the frame as it rattled a few more times, and then it just stopped. Total silence. I remember my heart pounding so hard I was sure they'd be able to hear it on the other side of the door. My friend finally whispered, "Did you guys see that?" And we all nodded, wide-eyed. Suddenly, nobody wanted to play ghost hunter anymore. We sat there for a while, straining to hear footsteps, voices, anything, but there was nothing. Eventually, one of my friends muttered, "Let's just go upstairs," and none of us argued. We grabbed our stuff and quietly left, heading back to our rooms without another word. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about that sound, the way the knob turned, and how certain I was that someone had been on the other side. I tried to convince myself it was just another guest, maybe confused about which room was which, but deep down I didn't believe that. The next morning, as we packed up to leave, we walked out through the front entrance, the same one where we'd seen the knob moving the night before. And that's when we all stopped in our tracks, because we realized the wooden door wasn't the only door. Covering it was this old, heavy glass storm door, the kind that creaks loudly when you open it and slams shut when you let it go. None of us had noticed it the night before, but in the moment it hit us all at once. When we'd watched that brass knob turning, we never heard the glass door open, not once. We all exchanged looks, but nobody said a word. We just walked to the car in silence and drove off, pretending it hadn't happened. And the strange thing is, we never really talked about it again. Anytime one of us brought it up, the others would just laugh it off, like it wasn't a big deal. But I know we were all thinking the same thing. Something had been on the other side of that door, and it wanted in. It was during the summer vacation a few years ago. My wife, our 2 kids, one was 17 and the other just 10, and I decided we'd had enough of city noise and screens. We wanted to unplug and spend some quality time camping in nature. We live in Utah, and with so much open land and wilderness around, it felt like the perfect opportunity to finally do it. We loaded up our old camper van with food, sleeping bags, and all the gear we'd need. Our plan was simple. Leave home around 2 in the afternoon, drive through some of the smaller towns, and by about 8 in the evening, find a nice spot along the way to park and set up for the night. Nothing complicated. The trip started off fine. The kids were actually getting along, laughing in the back seat, and the air smelled like summer. Dry desert heat, dust, and sagebrush. We passed through Helper, Utah, a town that already felt quiet and tucked away. After we left Helper, the road got emptier. No more steady flow of cars, no gas stations for miles, just long stretches of asphalt cutting through thick woods and hills. That's when the first strange thing happened. Inside the van, out of nowhere, we started smelling something faint but sharp. At first, I thought maybe we had driven past some roadkill, but the smell didn't fade. It lingered. It was this heavy, metallic scent, like raw meat left out too long in the heat. My wife wrinkled her nose, the kids complained about it, and I pulled over just to check things out. I walked around the van, checked the tires, checked the engine, even sniffed around thinking maybe something had gotten caught under the vehicle. But there was nothing. The smell was strongest inside, almost like it was seeping through the vents. We pushed on, trying to ignore it. But within an hour, more little things started going wrong. And just before the sun dipped behind the hills, one of the back tires blew. It wasn't a normal highway blowout either. It was this slow, steady flattening. And by the time I pulled over, the rubber was shredded. We were stuck. I checked my phone, no signal. My wife tried hers, same thing. It wasn't a main road, just a narrow back route that felt like it hadn't seen another car in hours. After some back and forth, we decided to just make the most of it. We had food, blankets, and everything we needed to last until morning. So, we pulled out the camp chairs, and for a while, it actually felt perfect. The sky was clear, the stars were brighter than I'd ever seen them, and the Milky Way stretched across the sky like a glowing river. The kids pointed out constellations. My wife leaned against me, and I remember thinking maybe this breakdown was a blessing in disguise. But that peace didn't last. Around midnight, the temperature dropped fast, and the woods around us seemed to close in. The night was too quiet. No crickets, no owls, nothing. Just the occasional rustle in the trees. At first, I thought it was just animals. But then, we started hearing sounds that didn't fit. The first was a knock. Just a dull, heavy thud against the side of the van. Everyone froze. My wife whispered, "Did you hear that?" And both kids sat up straight. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped out, sweeping the beam across the trees and dirt road. Nothing, just silence. I climbed back inside, telling everyone it was probably just something shifting in the van. But then it happened again. This time, louder. Not just one knock, but two, spaced apart like someone testing the walls. The kids were panicking now. My wife was whispering for me to stay inside, but I couldn't just sit there. I opened the door, walked around the van, and shined the light everywhere. Still nothing. And that's when I realized something that made my stomach drop. On the dirt, near the back tire where I'd been earlier, there were fresh footprints, bare footprints. They weren't mine, and they weren't from my family. Someone had been walking barefoot in the dark, circling our van. I didn't say anything to the kids. I didn't want to terrify them. But I locked the doors as soon as I got back inside. We tried to sleep after that, though none of us really did. Every so often, we'd hear faint crunches in the dirt outside, like footsteps keeping their distance but never leaving. Once, there was the sound of something dragging, slow and deliberate, moving past the van and into the trees. By the time the first glow of dawn showed through the windshield, we were all still sitting up, exhausted and jumpy. When I stepped out that morning, the footprints were still there, circling the van more times than I remembered seeing the night before. We changed the tire and got back on the road as fast as we could. Nobody spoke much until we hit the next town, and even now, years later, I can't shake the thought of whoever was out there. I was driving back from visiting my boyfriend at school. A late night, long drive across rural highway. It was supposed to be a straight 3-hour trip. Fast food, bad music, the kind of conversation that keeps a ride from getting boring. My friend rode with me. She'd had too much to drink at the party and insisted I drive her home. Between her slow, sleepy chatter and the dark road ahead, I wasn't exactly relaxed, but I've driven that route 100 times. I thought I knew what late-night driving felt like. About an hour into the trip, somewhere in that stretch where the highway cuts through open fields and there are almost no exits, the steering wheel started to tremble. At first, it was just a vibration, not the kind you notice if you're paying attention to music or talking, but it built quickly until my hands were being jerked by the wheel. I eased off the gas, flicked on my hazards, and pulled off at the next rest stop. Lucky for me, it was right there. A little concrete lot, one of those lonely places with a single vending machine and a row of picnic tables. I popped the trunk, ready to swap the spare. My friend was too drunk to be any help. She slurred jokes and cheered me on like I was doing something entertaining. I wasn't thrilled about changing a tire at midnight, but I could do it. I've changed flats before. Still, it's always faster with another pair of hands, so when 2 guys walked over out of the black and offered to help, I said, "Okay." Their headlights were off, and they kept to the shadows, but they were polite enough, so I didn't think much more of it. They started fiddling with the jack, and it became obvious quickly they weren't experienced. One of them kept handing me the wrong lug wrench and laughing as if this was some kind of practical joke. My stomach crawled a little. My friend, bless her, decided this was the perfect time to flirt with them. She unbuckled herself and wandered out, wobbling, to talk to them. I told her to get back in the car. She ignored me and giggled. I stepped between them and the road, not aggressive but firm. I told them we appreciated the offer, but we could handle it. That's when the first uneasy piece of the night slipped into place. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw headlights switch on from the far side of the lot. A car had eased out from the dark and pulled up across the way, engine idling. 2 more men got out and climbed into the light like they'd been waiting. The first 2 guys looked at that car and suddenly moved fast. They shoved the jack away like their hands burned and hustled back to it, climbed in, and sped off without a word. Everything changed in that second. Those first 2 guys hadn't been waiting to help. They'd been waiting for a signal. The new men crossed the lot, their faces plain in the interior light of the idling car. They didn't smile or apologize. They walked right up and without asking began loosening the lug nuts. Not like the first pair either, deliberate, efficient, like they changed tires for a living. My hands felt stupid and clumsy when I took the wrench back. I tried to say thanks, and one of them gave me a short nod and didn't look me in the eye. They finished, tossed the flat into the trunk like they would toss garbage, and walked back to their car. No small talk, no, you'll be fine. They slid in and drove off like they'd been there for nothing more than a 10-minute chore. I remember standing there long after they left, staring at the place where their taillights receded. The lot was quiet again, but something had shifted. For the rest of the ride home, my friend slept in the passenger seat and I kept replaying the way those first 2 guys melted into the dark when the signal arrived. It wasn't just the timing that bothered me, it was how the first pair hesitated while the second pair worked with calm hands. The whole thing felt orchestrated, practiced. Years later, that image still flickers in my mind. Shadowed figures waiting in a rest stop the way fishermen wait for fish to bite. I never called the cops about it, not even the next day. Who would I call? A report that 4 men changed my tire at midnight and left. No one asked for a license plate, no camera caught them, and I had no idea who to follow up with. It felt small and big at the same time. Small because I was fine. The car was fixed. Big because of the way it made the world feel less safe, like I'd driven into someone else's practice round, and they'd decided to let me walk away. What keeps me awake sometimes is how ordinary the whole moment looked. The lot was lit, the air smelled like warm tar and cigarettes, and my friend's laughter ricocheted off the vending machine. There was nothing cinematic about it, no obvious threat, no dramatic reveal. It was a mundane, efficient sort of menace. It's the kind of thing you walk away from with your life and an uneasy laugh and then realize later how close you might have been. If I think back,